This is 40K Today. A better start to any day than waking up next to the great unclean one, whispering sweet nothings in your ear. Hiya 40K folks, and welcome to 40K Today. This is your daily 15-minute news, views and interviews show that covers everything to do with the 41st millennium and our favourite hobby. I'm your host, Steve Joel, and today on the program, we bring John DeMaris back. See, he thought he could sneak away and play a game on Tabletop Simulator, having hosted the show pretty much for this whole week. But we won't let him get away that easy. What is TTS like for a novice? I'm still nervous to try it, but he has. I want to talk to him about it in a moment. Also, John Lennon of Warhammer and Art of War fame is in to give us our coaching tip of the week. But first up, it's Friday, the 22nd of May. Let's see what's going on in the 41st. First up, let's check in with our Facebook poll real quick. We've been asking you, are you a superstitious player? And to be honest, the results are surprising. It's all wound up with a 61% to 39% saying no. 61%, not superstitious at all. There are some great comments, though. How about this from Alex? Bad dice go into isolation on some out-of-the-way piece of terrain to think about what they've done. All others get set with sixes up to train them to be better and avoid the fate of their bad dice comrades. Who else does that? Be honest. You set up your dice with the sixes facing up. I've seen Nick Nunavati do it. People are superstitious. Come on. Next week's poll is going to be about turning up to games with unpainted grey models. Is that okay when other people do that? We'll find out next week. Let's get into the news. The folks at G-Dub have announced a price increase on some products is coming. To quote the Warhammer community page, from the 1st of June, around 400 Warhammer products will change in price. So, you know, there are about 3,000 Warhammer items available right now. They say well over 3,000, in fact. Most of the items that are changing haven't moved in price for years. That's what they say. So maybe you want to get in now and order what you need to avoid the price changes. So that's the bad news. Now for the good news, they also say that the factory in Nottingham has resumed operation. And after a 2-month hiatus, new releases are set to return. They'll be available to pre-order from May 30th, with new models hitting the stores from June 6th. There's another preview too, live on Twitch tomorrow at 2 p.m. British summertime. You've probably heard about this. There seems to be a pretty big push around this one too. So when you add in articles with titles such as The Imperium Ends and the fact that the Psychic Awakening is almost done, a lot of people I've seen online are adding 2 and 2 and getting 9th. We'll just have to wait for one more day. One more thing before we get into the show proper. Yesterday on 40K Today, we spoke to Sebastian Cole about his amazing Autark model. Sebastian also has a painting app, which is super cool. I want you to give this a go. It's called Brush Rage. It's a way to keep track of your projects. So if you're a painter and you have trouble keeping track of things, you want to know, for example, how long a model takes. Because people always ask, how long did that take you? And you never know what to say. Or if you want to know exactly what color combo you used on a model so you can duplicate it on another one, Brush Rage is for you. The link is in our show notes. Our good friend Trevi from Tactical Tortoise is running a Tabletop Simulator tournament right now, and it's huge. Most players are loving it. People are joining all the time. And it turns out the enthusiasm for TTS has spread into the 40K Today team. He thought he could get away. He's been hosting the show all week and doing interviews all week, and he's got a million other projects to do. So he thought he'd have time for those. But we're dragging him back in to 40K Today. John DeMaris, thanks. Normally we start with, hey, thanks for taking time to be on the show with us. But you are the show, so welcome back.
Well, I'm a small part of the show. One of the things I'm really blessed with is the team that we have doing 40K Today is absolutely top notch. So everything that happens, it's a collaboration of some really talented people that I got extremely lucky to assemble. So
I'll stop.
Yeah, it's been good.
Stop.
Yeah.
So listen, let's talk about Tabletop Simulator, because I saw you with Trevi from Tactical Tortoise. You were in there shoutcasting a couple of games. Now, that was no big surprise. You're very good at what you do, and seeing you shoutcast, that was no shock to anyone. But then I saw you on there playing a game. And that was a little more of a surprise. So as a person who's approaching this with some sort of trepidation and nervousness, I want to ask you how it all went right from the start, really. How did you find getting into it and learning the steps of it and getting into Tabletop Simulator? How did it go?
Oh, well, I'll tell you from the jump. I'm old, much like you, Steve. Well, let's not say old. Let's say age challenge. All right,
Experienced. We're just experienced. Yeah.
We're experienced, right? So we're not like these young whippersnappers that, have grown up whipping these things around and it's no problem, right? But I'll tell you that it's Tabletop Simulator is actually extremely approachable. And Trevi sat me down. He's like, I'm going to teach you how to play. And within 20 minutes, I was comfortable enough to play without needing any much intervention. Now, I've since sped up some. Like, I'm kind of slow because I'm still getting my muscle memory and getting my my TTS legs underneath me, so to speak. But that'd be no different. The first time you played 40K, you're looking at your rule book. What does this do? How far can I move? And if you hadn't played tabletop games before, holding the tape measure, picking up bottles, moving them around, and sort of all of that it's just muscle memory. You learn how to do it. TTS is no different. So just a few reps. Like I said, I could have anybody playing TTS in 15 minutes. I believe that confidently. And then I think after one game of playing TTS, you'd be competent enough to play on your own.
Okay.
No problem.
So yeah. I have a couple of questions. There are lots of little things you can do to move models and make sure they go, little tricks to keys that people can learn. So those are things people can learn. But my questions are more around the tactical side, which is where I struggle to sort of shift my tabletop experience into the TTS universe. So for things, for example, like, if you want to tri-point the other guy's models so that you trap them in combat, in TTS, you can do all of that stuff?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's much like the regular game, right? So part of the social contract of playing a miniatures game is declaring intent and making sure both parties understand not only what it is you're trying to do, but if you can do it. So tri-pointing, you'll see like really good players. You watch a Nick Nanavati play against Richard Siegler. He says, I'm going to tri-point this, and they just sort of move the model so it gets tri-pointed because they both know, they can both see that it can clearly happen.
Yeah.
He's declared his intent, right? Now, sometimes those two good players go, well, that's going to be really tricky because when you pile in, you have to move towards this model, and this model. So, I'm not sure you can do that, and they make you demonstrate it. But in both cases, you can do the exact same thing in TTS. So in my game, I played against Innes Wilson, right?
Yeah.
Who is technically one of the best players on the planet. Like, he is so good in the assault phase. And he put on an absolute clinic as we sort of talked through what we could and couldn't do, specifically him trying to play around heroic interventions in the Armor of Rust. So, and we did all of that, like really, really high level, technical, in-depth play. And if you get a chance to watch that video, you should definitely check it out. You probably learn something about the assault phase.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool, yeah.
For our listeners who may not be familiar, Armor of Rust is a Space Wolves thing which allows you to fight first in the fight phase. It's a very powerful tool. And when I was playing my Space Wolves, I loved that Armor of Rust a lot. You can heroically intervene 6 inches. Anyway, so you intervene 6 inches, you're doing your Armor of Rust. The point being, you're doing a lot of technical, high-level stuff that you do on the tabletop, but you can do it all in TTS.
Yep. And I think my favorite thing about TTS is one of the biggest, and I love playing 40K, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan. But one of the things that stops me from playing more is getting my models to the location where I want to play, getting them out, getting my army set up, taking them down, taking them home, storing them again. Like, that whole process means that I can play maybe one game a week, typically, is how it works being an adult and all that fun stuff. Maybe two on a good week, and then sometimes I get to play in a tournament, right? I get three rounds on a Saturday, or it's a 2-day GT and I get 5. So that happens on occasion. But with TTS, I can literally play a game every night before I went to bed, a couple 2-3 hours if I wanted to. And I don't think I'd play that much, but
but you can. The option is there, right?
Yeah, and you like save your army as an object. So to load your army, it's literally like click. Okay, my army is ready to go. I'm ready to deploy.
Yeah. You don't have to. Believe me, getting 40 odd drones out and setting them up in their two-man units, that takes a long time. But if it's all a click away, then I see your point. It's a lot faster, right? Saves a lot of time.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
listen, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time, special guest John DeMaris, and we look forward to having you back on the show soon.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve. Always a pleasure.
Now, we'll make sure the link to that game between Innes and John is in our show notes so you can see how they both went. I'm torn. I want John to do well, but I love Space Wolves. Next up on the show, John Lennon, superstar of the Brohammer team, coach at Art of War, and all-round great guy, is with us to impart some wisdom. It's our coaching tip of the week next.
Today's episode of 40K Today is brought to you by Frontline Gaming. Frontline Gaming is a one-stop shop for all your Warhammer hobby needs, discounted products, American-made gaming mats and terrain, and a full line of miniatures painting service and daily hobby content. And this can all be found at frontlinegaming.org.
Welcome back. Every week on a Friday, we like to get one tip, just one tip, from a top player or coach that we can work on over the weekend or whenever we get a chance to play again, whether it's TTS or with friends or whatever. This week, the coach is John Lennon, and the tip is absolute gold. It's something I'm guilty of not doing. John DeMaris spoke to John Lennon.
This week, we're very lucky to be joined by the third place finisher in the ITC, John Lennon, and coach at the Art of War. John, let's talk about a coaching tip. Say somebody wants to take a step forward in competitive play and get better at the game of 40K. What is a tip that we can sort of illuminate for somebody right now?
Hey, thanks for having me on, John. So something that I always say is important is if you're trying to make that next step from where you are as a player to being more competitive, I always think it's very important to kind of pick one army and stay with it. You'll often see a lot of competitive players switch armies very frequently, but I really encourage my coaching clients not to do that, especially when they're trying to improve their skills. Something that I see a lot is people go from army to army. And when that happens, it's very easy to mess up rules. Even if you're switching to a more powerful army, it also often does not improve your winning percentage. I saw people switch from like a less powerful Dark Eldar army to Space Marines and still hit about the same, win-loss record. Obviously, the Space Marines were better, but if you're not as familiar with your army, you are going to suffer. Now, what I would say is that anytime you're going to switch an army, be prepared to maybe not have initial success, but if you stick with it, you can definitely get to that point. A big part of Warhammer is knowing how to react to different situations. You need to know how to screen against different armies, target priority, what your weapons do, what psychic powers to cast. If you go from, two completely different factions, one to the other, it'll take a while to get those mechanics down, but it's very important to practice that so that after a certain point in time, you'll kind of have those repetitions down and you'll be more comfortable with that army. At that point, you can work on mastering it.
Yeah, so let's focus on that a little bit. I don't think people understand. I'm going to try to explain it a little more in depth. So when you play the game, you develop muscle memory. The things that you do automatically, you automatically zone things out. You sort of develop habits that allow you to play your army with shortcuts in your mind. You don't have to think about it. The more things that you don't have to think about that are become a little more automatic. Now, there's a downside to that, which I'll hit on in a second. But the more muscle memory you have for playing your list, the more cycles or thought processes you can put into focusing on the game, right? So if you're not trying to figure out, well, how do I zone out deep strikes with this particular army? Oh, yeah, I normally put a character over here and I do this and blah, blah, blah. If you sort of do that automatically, now you can be thinking about, well, what's my target priority? What am I trying to kill? And then, even in that situation, a lot of times you get a feel for what your army does damage-wise. But if you're new to the army, you have to like do all this math all the time. You're just like, well, okay, well, I hit on 3s. I have 21 attacks. I'm strength 5. I'm going to do about 7 damage, and so I need this and this and this to kill it. Where that all becomes second nature with reps in a list with that muscle memory. So it allows you to free up cycles in your brain to focus on the actual strategy of the game. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, obviously, knowing what your army does is very important. But another big thing is movement. Almost every army moves differently. Like I helped one of my friends, just play with Tyranids once because he's played against my Tyranids 20 times. He thought he knew the rules. First turn, the Swarm Lord wasn't in range to buff anyone. So I'm like, okay, like we got to start over here.
Yeah.
Learning how to position different units. Like making sure your drones are in range of Savior Protocol to save your Riptide. That's something that you don't think about when you play against Tau. You just assume that it's always there. But as a Tau player, you could very easily mess that up if you didn't have experience with the army. Even though Tau are very powerful right now, I imagine that I would do worse if I were to take Tau to a tournament than another army, just because I don't have those repetitions moving the army. I'm not as familiar with what the units do and when to use certain abilities. I would kind of need to get some practice games and recognize, all right, this is what a turn looks like where I need to use Montcalm, or this is when I need to use Kalyan, or this is when I should use this stratagem. And then sometimes you have to use the stratagem and then realize I didn't need to use that stratagem. And you need to do that before you're going to have success with an army. Otherwise, you're going to make those kind of mistakes in a tournament, and it could potentially cost you the game.
Yeah, and I think another thing to sort of think about from developing mastery of a list. So if you are a player that goes flavor of the month, you're playing the Broviathan list 1 month, and then Siegler's Tau list the next month, and then whatever is the next hot flavor, Possess Bomb. Those 3 lists all play extremely differently, right? And so you are spending time sort of thinking about how to play your list, where if you know your list inside and out and you have true mastery over a list that you're playing, then you can be thinking about, how do I thwart what my opponent's going to do? You can be thinking about what their objectives are, where you may not have those loose cycles to sort of get into the game if you don't have mastery over what you're playing with, because you're spending so much time trying to figure out what you should be doing as opposed to just executing what you should be doing and thinking about what your opponent is trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a game of allocating resources, but that's also, mentally, how much time are you putting into each thing? The more you're trying to catch up with your own army, the less you're thinking about what's actually happening on the table. If you have to stop and read your codex every 5 minutes, again, you're gonna miss out on some stuff on the table that maybe should be paying attention to. Maybe you're gonna miss something in your opponent's turn because you're trying to remember how far your Space Marine bikers move, for example. And I certainly went through that when I switched from Genius to Occult to Space Marines. I had a couple of games where I absolutely messed up rules, and some of it was practice games. You catch it afterwards when you're reading things. Those aren't mistakes you want to make in a tournament. And I kind of see that all the time, where like I play against someone who has switched to a new army, and I'm playing against them, and they do something, and maybe it wasn't the right rule, and I might happen to know that rule, and when I point it out to them, suddenly their plan is off. They thought they could advance and charge with something, and well, they can't, and they don't, or like the stratagem costs 2 command points and they only have 1 command point left. I've had that happen before, and suddenly their whole plan hinged on something that just isn't going to happen.
I think that's a fantastic tip. So it's just develop mastery in one thing to take steps forward, and then once you've developed mastery in a list, then you can think about switching into something else, but understanding that that's going to have an opportunity cost where you're gonna take some lumps while you're in the learning phase.
That's John Lennon, and what a great tip. After swapping armies way too often, I really think the key to getting better right now, for me anyway, is to stick with one and learn to play it properly. All right, before we say goodbye, it's time for the model of the day.
It's the model of the day, the model of the day, the model of the day.
Today's model of the day is suddenly an international superstar. So Nick Baton, one of the nicest guys in the game, he works at Games Workshop, right? And he tweeted to his 10,000 followers about this model. And then it went nuts. So it's featured on Blood of Kittens. It's featured on Hammer of Wrath. It's been all over the interweb. Funny story. I loved the pictures of this model so much that I was desperate to find the genius who had created it. And I searched all over the world, starting in the States, going to the UK and Europe. And it turns out, well, the guy who made it is just up the road from me in little old New Zealand, at the bottom of the world, the most unlikely spot. Turns out I've met the guy a bunch of times in our mutual local store and at tournaments. His name is Luke. He's got a blog called Monkey Chucker, and he's created a Tyrranocyte womb, is what it is. The Tyrranocyte itself is beautifully painted and crafted. It splits in half, and both halves stand independently. And when it opens, inside it is a tyrannid baby in utero. There's a bunch of eggs and all sorts of other stuff in there too. And every part of it looks so real. This model is beyond amazing for its conversion and its painting. The pictures are on our Facebook and Instagram. But please go to his blog and see the whole story of how he crafted this amazing work. The link to the blog and everything else is in our show notes. And as always, if you have a model that you want us to feature on the show, or if you've seen a model that should feature on the show, let us know. And that's it for today. Thank you for joining us. A big thank you to our content producer, Alex Painter, our social media whiz, Tanya Gates, and our technical producer, Seamus Ronan, for all of their work in putting the program together. If you have anything you think we should feature on the show, please get in touch. Contact us via Facebook. Just search 40K Today. And make sure you join us next week. The legendary Val Heffelfinger from 40K Stat Center is with us. I'm excited. Are the boys back in town? Is that a much-missed podcast I see on the horizon? Does Val have news to share with us on Monday? You bet he does. Also, tomorrow, don't forget to tune in to hear our Best of the Week. Download it via the Frontline Gaming Network or via your favourite podcast player. We'll see you tomorrow. Till then, for the 40K Today team, I'm Steve Joel. That's what's happening in 40K Today.